two rail journeys behind steam on this film. The first on the main line from Chennai, Madras, behind Heritage Loco Empress of India to Gundi, and the second from New Delhi behind WP Class Pacific to the Rewari Junction steam shed operated by the Northern Railway. We start our first film on the massively overcrowded streets of Chennai, just outside the main station there, with added items of interest being these two locomotives on permanent display in the gardens outside the administrative building. Once again we notice the white Indian taxis, which, if they look vaguely familiar to any of you who were around in the 1950s in England, they are of course the old Morris Oxford saloons, which are manufactured in India by the Hindustani Motor Corporation. Whereas these tricycle-based taxis represent transport of an even earlier era, but still operating efficiently in the hubbub of the Chennai traffic. We then make our way for a brief visit to the station concourse to experience the hurly-burly, the noise and general clamour which is Indian Railways. Back out again to the relative calm of the gardens at the front of the station, and then we shall cross the road, which in itself was an exercise in life preservation, and wait for our coach to take us to the alternative station in Chennai, which will be the start of our journey on the Heritage train. This imposing building with its twin towers is the headquarters of the Indian Southern Railway. Street vendors on the pavement opposite prove that private enterprise is alive and well in Chennai, however modest the returns may be. The next stage of our morning's journey is a short trip by coach to Chennai's Egmore station, where we shall join our heritage train, Empress of India. And very impressive she was too. And the familiar sight of the ambassador taxis lined up outside the station building. And this is the relative calm of the station entrance. And there's our first view of our locomotive, surrounded by a bevy of onlookers. Very difficult to get a clear view at all. Everybody, it seems, wanted their photograph taken alongside. The locomotive had only recently been restored by Indian Railways, and it made its inaugural run in January of 2012. So we were privileged to join it very soon after its launch. Hopefully it will become a regular on the railway scene in this part of India. Quite unexpectedly, we became the centre of attention, we being our little group of 10 or 11 folk, and we were suddenly surrounded by photographers who wanted to record the event, and we were then invited into the station master's office for a small reception. That really did put the icing on the cake. And here you see us dutifully seated around the central table with drinks available, and sweetmeats were then provided, and it was a very pleasant experience. And there's the photographer being photographed,
so none of this happened.
together with the rest of the group. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Alain, as ever there, in the centre of the picture, concentrating on photographic perfection. And then it was time for our little group to get on board our newly restored coach and prepare ourselves for the start of our journey. Everybody looking happy and expectant. I say everybody, the station official wasn't particularly happy there, but no doubt he was wondering what could go wrong with a 100-year-old locomotive. But he's obviously heard the good news and cheered up.
Is this your first visit to Chennai? It is. Yes. Did you go around Chennai a bit? No, we arrived quite late last night. Going there. And the traffic was...
And very slowly, as befits an old lady, we pull away from the station platform. Mixture of old and new now, as we see a GPS linked speedometer operating through a laptop device which will tell us our speed en route.
Enjoying, yeah? Enjoy. You get a chance to give. This station is a very oldest station. It is called Chennai EGMO. Okay. Actually, we have conducted earlier two specials here only, January and before that in August. Multiply. Nearly, yeah, half a kilometer.
So I need people today.
Yeah. Average around 700 to 800 people. 700 to 800 people are traveling. That train. It's not like Europe. Europe are very limited. Nine coach length, no? 9 coach length.
Oh, I know. Very, very long stations.
Yeah, long stations.
If you go to the other end, you can see the locomotive from the other end.
Yeah, come. Other end, when you go to Baba.
Leave everything here, I'll look after you.
Then you use it to debt therapy.
Ladies first. Ladies first.
Listen, I should have been a gentleman.
Come, captain of the team. Come.
Oh, how very kind.
We'll take it.
Where is our friend? Friend is giving me. I told him my email address to our captain. Captain.
Line you're talking about?
No, the machinery.
It's 3 lines, it's only for 2 lines.
Yeah, but in England we...
Indian Railways obviously have a litter problem. Being the largest employer in India, they have the manpower with which to deal with it.
How are you tackling the problem of polythene in your country? Polythene is banned in your country. Polythene, plastic bags.
I'm sorry?
Plastic bags.
a view now of activity on the locomotive footplate. Quite strenuous activity too when it comes to moving the regulator. At least that would appear to be the problem.
So that in future can be contains going on to Alwa. It's actually doing double the journey we are. It's as far from Rewari to Alwa as it is Delhi to Rewari. And I'm going to find out who's running it. If anybody wants to miss the shed, just carry on.
Here, and tomorrow, today we did not fly for Delhi. Tomorrow we are going to Delhi. Indian train, we overnight. We normally take Yes, yes. Up to 35. This guy in the Pharaoh, you like it? 25 miles an hour. Yeah.
A very respectable 25 miles an hour or thereabouts. Very smooth too.
Has everyone finished? I think one more. It's the person. All the people have come. All the people have come. Are you sure?
Well, all too soon we were at our destination, the station of Gundi, and as you can see the interest on both sides of the platform, on the far side and on our near side, was increasing by the minute. Once again, everybody wanting their photograph taken alongside this wonderful piece of Indian heritage. And after spending some time photographing the loco in a static situation, we watched as the diesel arrived to back up the locomotive and its train and move it quietly out of the platform. I'm still looking for the spring on the jack-in-the-box. Well, our trusty loco is about to get its helping hand from the diesel, which I mentioned just now. So one last look and then we must move on. So our little group moved on to this very pleasant hotel very close to Chennai airport, ready for our onward flight to New Delhi, a flight of a couple of hours from the southeast of India to the nearer to the northwest. This was an extremely comfortable hotel, what little we saw of it, as indeed all the hotels that we used on this trip were. The railway touring company did us proud with the accommodation that they were able to organise in conjunction with their So here we are on Saturday morning in New Delhi, and we've just arrived at Delhi's Cantonment station, which is one of their suburban stations, I guess, and we're here to join what is referred to as a steam express, a heritage steam express hauled by a very large WP class Pacific locomotive, larger than any that have hauled us hitherto. And we look forward to our first view of our locomotive as we arrive on the station. And she'll be over there to the left. There's a very large water tower. The background music is provided by a local temple. And there's our locomotive, resplendent. There has been something of a renaissance in Indian mainline steam, and the shed at Rewari that we're about to visit is the focal point for that renaissance, where most of the available locomotives of this size are housed in various states of repair or disrepair, as we shall see as part of our visit. But this loco performed remarkably well and gave us an exhilarating ride down the main line, with much to see on the way. Chris, one of our group, had already blagged a ride onto the footplate, and I think he stayed there for the bulk of the journey. He couldn't stop talking about it afterwards. Highlight of the trip as far as he was concerned, and I can well understand that. My visit to the footplate was far briefer than Chris's, but does enable us to catch some of the atmosphere of what goes on the footplate of a large loco. Certainly there was plenty of room for the crew that Indian Railways dictate man their big steam locomotives.
हाथ पकड़ दो इसको, इसे एक बार हाथ पकड़ियो पड़ेगी, हाथ पकड़ियो, पकड़ तो सही हाथ, ठंडे आ रहा।
And that very imposing temple is the sound source of the background music. Evidence there of the American influence Baldwin Locomotive Co. involved at least with the manufacture of the wheels, probably more. It seems as though the various sheds leave their trademark logos on their locomotives. Certainly Rewari shed appears to have done that with this locomotive. There's their very smart shield logo. Just reversing out of the siding, I reckon. Finally underway, as I commented at the time. We went backwards briefly and then forwards again on the main line, and then we were underway. We have a brief view in a moment of the occupants of the coach that we were using. And the seat backs were very ornate. They were decorated with the logos of various pre-vesting railway companies. some interest here as we pass close to the airport. I don't know whether this is the main airport for New Delhi. There's certainly a large aircraft over there in the distance. Contrasting means of transport there. Another feature of these stations on the outskirts of large cities seems to be the length of the platforms that we finally come to rest. Our first intermediate stop and an opportunity for those who are interested to move forward and have another look at the locomotive, which hadn't really altered very much from the one that brought us out of New Delhi's main station, but such is the attraction of steam. There's always something. Hey pal, who's that that's disturbing our slumbers? Yet another interloper on the footplate. This time it's Margaret, another of our group. Fascinated by all that's going on. Probably giving a few instructions because she's actually a qualified engine driver and drives on the Dean Forest Railway. More fascinated local onlookers in their Indian national costume. Something we noticed elsewhere, stations seem to be one of the focal points for gathering and collecting fresh drinking water, and that's what these local folk were doing. And this lady with a very large family in tow seemed to be collecting alms. I think she was successful.
There you are. There you are.
My camera was the fascination for this young man, and indeed for his brother.
We've got a lot of them now. Thank you.
अरे हम तो मेरे कैमरा है उठा मेरे लिए नहीं रहा
we're well and truly in open country now. A great deal of evidence of agriculture, gathering in of crops. I don't know whether it was flax or what it was they were gathering in. They were carrying it away in bundles on their shoulders. There was a great deal of activity at various points along the line. Another of these substantial stations with their overbridges, their water collection points, their pedestrian shelters. My goodness. And for those of you following this journey on the map, this station is called Pataudi Road. Our 2-hour journey from the centre of New Delhi through its suburbs and out through open countryside has brought us very close to our final destination. After a very smooth run, we arrive at Rewari Junction. The end of the station canopy there proudly announces that. On the left is a train of Australian coal, imported coal, and on the right is our locomotive being checked over, and we waited and waited to see the departure. Our locomotive is still static, but the train of Australian coal moves smoothly on its way back in the direction of Delhi. Slight distraction now as we look at the birds in the eaves of the station canopy there. I think they're called bulbul. They were certainly very active. Didn't appear to be nesting, but undoubtedly they were feeding and generally preening themselves. They're very colourful birds. Departure seems to be imminent now, so we'll wait for a real steam flourish. Unfortunately, as you will see, we were somewhat disappointed. It was a very slow, steady, and some would say graceful departure, but no great histrionics from the locomotive. Time to move now to the Rewari steam loco shed, which has evolved from a very, very active steam facility in the days of mainline steam. You'll see a note in a minute which says that at one time there were 500 maintenance staff and several hundred locomotives shedded at this facility. It survived the threat of closure, it survived the use by diesel traction, and is now a heritage steam loco museum and loco maintenance facility, and is the home of the locomotive that we've just been pulled by from Delhi to Rewari Junction. And this tablet on the wall of the building tells the story of its evolution. In comparison with the workforce that were in this facility when it was a fully operational steam facility, the workforce of 500 men recorded on the tablet there, the workforce now was down to 3 men approaching retirement and 1 young apprentice lad. Quite clearly the workload ahead of them was way beyond their resources. One wonders quite what the future of the facility holds, but if they can keep 1 or 2 locomotives in an operational condition, that in itself will be an achievement. And from the point of view, from a British perspective, there were some interesting exhibits. There was a locomotive built by the Vulcan Foundry in Leicestershire. There was a steam traction engine. There was also a steam crane from Leeds, all of which you'll see as we watch these images of the shed as I wandered round. There's the substantial 462 Vulcan built loco, and it's tender ahead of it, I guess. And there's a plate on its cab side indicating the key data about the locomotive. I have to admit that I find static exhibits of locomotives in this state rather depressing. One wonders if they will ever breathe steam and move again. But the very fact that they have been retained is itself, or does itself, give some hope for the future. A different class of locomotive here, AWE on its buffer beam. This loco in the distance here was far from being operational. Its wheel sets were removed and it looked in a sorry state. I think that's what Rewari has done. It's gathered up what hardware is available, not necessarily with a clear idea of how they will be reconstructed or even whether they will be reconstructed, but at least they're all in one location, albeit this one is outside, minus just about everything. And here's the Fowler steamroller that I mentioned earlier on. John Fowler and Co. Leeds Limited. Leeds, the centre of the universe. And these pieces of equipment have been removed from another Leeds manufactured device, a steam crane manufactured by Thomas Smith and Co. in Leeds. And there's the main element of that steam crane, the boiler in the back. This significant loco seemed to be well up together, and I've no reason to believe that this one wasn't operational. It wasn't in steam, but there's no reason why it shouldn't have been returned to steam. It was one of the tidiest locomotives in the facility. And here's our first evidence of refurbishment activity. This gentleman was fashioning a seal for a valve cover, and two of his colleagues were on top of the boiler of the large locomotive to his right. I don't know exactly what they were doing, but they were busily engaged, as you can see. A few more still images. This is Loco 3438, which was another one that looked to be operational, whereas this one was receiving some fairly substantial surgery. Loco 2151. It's very interesting to compare the views of the footplate of these immobile locomotives with the locomotive that we travelled behind from Delhi to Rewari, and it's easy to see the work involved in bringing these locomotives back to an operational condition and the challenge that that represents. Another interesting feature of the Rewari facility was this exhibition, museum facility if you wish, with quite a number of exhibits of British made goods made back in the 1800s and 1900s and exported. That of course was the big plus of the Empire or Commonwealth to the British manufacturers, a ready-made market and a very willing market for British made goods. And now of course these are being moved on and maintained, cared for and valued by the Indian Railway set up of an independent India. These Birmingham made lamps of various designs, very clearly recognisable as such, and visible all over Great Britain on the heritage railways that are operational here. The photographic exhibits were interesting too, because we actually visited the Victoria Railway terminus in Bombay, or Mumbai as it's now called, and the display of the logos of the various independent railway companies in India also made interesting exhibits. More photographs, the beauty parade as it's called. a super picture of the turntable and the roundhouse at Rewari in its heyday. One of the final exhibits that we looked at was this very impressive piece of model engineering. 5-inch gauge, I should think it was, maybe slightly larger, steam engine, beautiful model. And we then wandered back down the main thoroughfare from the gateway of the shed back towards Rewari Junction Station, past the houses which were presumably occupied at one time by the shed personnel, the management personnel, but were now guarded over by this substantial bull, and nobody would want to argue with him. And much closer to the station, under a spreading tree, was a fine example of rural India, a barber at work in the open air, and all his customers and he seemed in a happy frame of mind. Wonderful. Ask his customer. And our final views as we stand on the station overbridge waiting for our train back to New Delhi is a suburban train coming in the distance there. Diesel hauled, of course. No longer any operational steam on operational services, but we've been very fortunate today to have a taste of what things were like in India 20, 30 years ago, and I wouldn't have missed it.